This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Lotierzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fist. My name is Frank Lotierzo, former fighter, part-time writer, full-time observer. On Thanksgiving, a couple days before Thanksgiving Eve, joined by co-host who was gone last week, Mr. Happy himself, Jack Hirsch. Jack, how are you tonight?
You know, when I take a week off, so much boxing activity takes place, Frank. So much news came in from 1 week ago.
It's amazing, Jack. You're right about that. But before we get to the boxing, since we didn't get to it tonight, I need 2 things from you, okay? And I'm putting you on the spot, and I don't care because you don't mind being on the spot. Number 1, you see our buddy Joe Bergman. He's already harassing us about this game tonight. Like, I just want to know one thing. If the Eagles win, do they get the Lombardi back? That's only a joke, Joe. Jack,
yeah.
Who wins tonight, the Eagles or the Chiefs? I'm a pessimist. I think the Eagles win tonight.
Chiefs win on a field goal on the last play of the game, but it's not
like the Super Bowl?
Yeah, it's not going to mean anything if they meet again in the Super Bowl. And there's a good chance they will meet in the Super Bowl again.
That was my pick.
A reasonable chance. And I don't think the Eagles take too much out of it if they do beat the Chiefs. It makes them feel good for the moment. But the one thing the Eagles don't want to have happen to them is get a butt whipping. If the Chiefs beat them by, let's say, 24 points, and then they meet again in the Super Bowl, there might be a little
That'll never happen, Jack.
Creeping into Philadelphia.
The Chiefs have not been blowing teams out. The Eagles are too good to get blown out. The Chiefs could win the game, but I don't think either team can blow the other out. Okay, and then the other one, and this kind of fits into boxing a little bit because I've always said that Frazier Ali is the greatest rivalry in sports history in my lifetime. Michigan, Ohio State play this weekend, Jack. Number 2 versus number 3, both 11-0. Conference is on the line. Playoff berth is on the line. Michigan is without their quarterback, and they believe the reason they're without their coach is because of the pressure that Ohio State put on the Big Ten about some kind of actions done against Michigan. So I'm asking you, Michigan's a 4-point favorite. I don't care about that. Who wins the game?
I think Michigan does. For years, Ohio State had their number. I think Michigan has turned it around recently, and they'll prevail in this game, despite all the chaos going on at that university.
Jack, this has more drama than Ali and Frazier, all these side stories, though.
Oh, it doesn't have a fraction of the drama of Ali and Frazier.
A little, it does a little bit.
Ohio State would have been a 6th-rounder on the Ali Frazier undercard, the first fight.
I agree with that, but I mean, just the drama. That's all. And they're 2 of the
on next season anyway from Michigan in all probability.
Who's he coaching? The Raiders or the Redskins or the Commanders? Redskins, whatever.
Angle on the network. He's pretty firm that he's going to be coaching the Raiders. He'll go to the best spot for him where he could win. It might be the LA Chargers.
If Harbaugh goes to the Raiders, that means Belichick goes where?
Well, he might stay at New England. They might
He's not saying
someone as a personnel director. He might accept it because it might be someone who he knows, who he respects, who he can work with. But that person will be Belichick's boss as far as making decisions with the personnel. And if Belichick's willing to accept that, he could stay at New England. But you'd think Belichick wants the record. And so for him to get it, the sooner he gets it, the better. He's no spring chicken. So he might want to go somewhere where he can win more games than at New England.
Okay, well, Jack, I did a deep dive on their record.
Are we going to have any time for boxing, Frank?
We have plenty of time for boxing. All right, Joe, I agree with you. Ohio State wins. Hope I'm wrong. Jack, take it away. Where do you want to go? Andrade?
Oh, yeah, the big fight Saturday night. You're talking college football. If you have a choice, Frank, to see one or the other, maybe I shouldn't ask you this because you answer
You shouldn't.
my place boxing fans. You know what I'm going to ask you, Frank? The big fight, Demetrius Andrade, David Benavidez, and Michigan, Ohio State. You'll pick Michigan, Ohio State. I'll give you a waiver.
I think I would.
I'll give you a waiver there because Andrade and Benavidez, they haven't been in a truly.
If it's Canelo Benavidez, it's different.
Right. They haven't truly been in a big fight until now. And you know, Frank, how high I've always been on Demetrius Andrade. It's easy to not be so high on him anymore because of inactivity. He's now age 35. Talk about guys with ice water in their veins who could hold out this long. But he reminds me of Terence Crawford. Crawford doesn't think about his age. He's holding out forever. Andre Ward was that way. He held out a long time until they can have a scenario that would be good, really good for their career. And this is it for Andrade. I won't call it a mega fight per se, Frank, but I'll call it a very big fight. This isn't just an ordinary match. By far, this is the biggest fight of Andrade's career. And you could say Benavidez is as well, even though he fought Caleb Plant, because this is it. Both guys are top of the line quality fighters. So whoever wins this fight, they become a top 10 pound for pound candidate. If they win clearly, if either guy wins this fight clearly, you can make an argument to put him in the top 10 pound for pound. I'm saying clearly, Frank. I'm not talking about eking out a split decision that could have gone either way. So both guys have a chance to make a statement. And Andrade is the guy who's had a harder time getting big fights, okay? Because no one has wanted to fight Andrade because he has a spoiler type style. And they know how good he is. He's like the Shakur Stevenson of the higher weight divisions, you could say, in a way. And high risk, low reward. Why fight a guy like him? But Benavidez is stepping up in part. Benavidez is stepping up because he didn't have much of a choice. Canelo wasn't about to fight him. It isn't showing any inclination.
This clears the deck, though, Jack. If Benavidez wins.
Morrell. But listen, David Morrell challenged Benavidez. And he's probably thinking Andrade is less of a risk.
Right.
And it's an intriguing matchup, Frank.
Andrade can't afford Benavidez can afford a loss a little more than Andrade because of the age factor. But this is a huge fight for Andrade because this is his one shot at making it to the big time. He can't stink the place out. He's got to show up. A lot of people have been tough on him because of his somewhat resume and his placid approach to boxing. And sometimes he looks like he does a lot of things wrong, but it usually works out for him. He's not a great boxer. He's a good boxer. He's not a puncher, but he doesn't throw balloons either. He can punch a little bit. So I think that he's going to provide a stiff test for Benavidez. Jack, for me, it comes down to this. I don't know what kind of a chin that Andrade has. I don't know how big his heart is. I know he says the right things. I know he's a tough guy mentally, but I've never seen him push. So I think this fight is going to come down a lot to, and I hate to say it because it's cliche, but conditioning and determination and durability. If Andrade can get through the early blitz that we know Benavidez is going to bring, and he's there in the second half of the fight, and I think he's the better boxer with the quicker hands, and he may even have a better IQ, Jack, a better fighter's IQ. I think it becomes an interesting fight. I don't see this fight as wide as I used to. When it was first talked about, I was pretty sure that Benavidez was going to win. I was very confident about that. I'm not quite as confident as I was.
Frank, I have a book on both of them as you do, but I have more of a book on Andrade because I've seen him up close a good number of times on his fights. And he starts very fast, like he tears out of the gate, looks sensational early, but if his opponent survives, he then settles down. We know Benavidez is going to be bringing it the whole time. bringing the pressure, especially the second half of the fight. My concern isn't what goes on with Andrade the first half of the fight. The first few rounds, he's going to be fine. I expect them to, forge to an early lead. But Benavidez is going to keep coming at him, and he is the naturally bigger guy. I mean, I can't think of Andrade as being a super middleweight. And the way I'm thinking of this is a middleweight against the super middleweight. Benavidez does have those physical advantages. But with that said, you look at Benavidez's biggest fight to date, Caliplant, his biggest fight. He won clearly on points, but he wasn't truly dominant. He didn't make a statement. He needed to make a statement. In a way, it wasn't a victory for Benavidez.
He proved he was the better guy, but he didn't separate himself. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. He held serve. He put absolutely no pressure on Canelo. If anything, it was a step backwards because Canelo was gloating. Well, I stopped, Plant. You didn't even stop him, and you're challenging me. And, but the thing with Andrade, too, he's been so dominant in his fights for the most part. He's kind of set the tempo. What happens if he has to fight a wide open type fight, like a Sugar Ray
There's more questions about him. Exactly.
But you said something a moment ago that was very thought-provoking to me. I didn't think about. Who can afford a loss more? Obviously, neither can afford a loss. I think more pressure is on Andrade. I'm going to tell you why. Benavidez is much more charismatic than Andrade. He can lose this fight in any type of fashion, and they'll be able to rebuild him later on. Okay, get him a few easy fights. He has a name. He has appeal. Andrade doesn't have any real appeal. His appeal, and for him to get appeal, he's got to beat Benavidez and show he's world class. He has to wake up the boxing community.
Not only does he have to beat Benavidez, Jack, he has to beat Benavidez in a way that get people talking that he could do the same to Canelo, and that's a step further. But he has to win in a convincing fashion so people have a reason to believe that he can beat Canelo. And look, if he outboxes Benavidez, uses the ring, picks his feet up, uses his jab, look, that's a recipe to give Canelo a hard time. But that's why there's more pressure on him, where Benavidez is considered the younger, the alpha. There's always going to be a market to see him fight. He talks good, so I agree. There's more pressure on Andrade. But you know what, Jack? Benavidez, as you said, against Caleb Plant, he held serve. That was pretty much all he did. And by the way, Jason, it's on Showtime pay-per-view this weekend.
Yeah, let me say this, okay? With Andrade, Andrade has this great amateur background. He hasn't lost in 15 years. He beat elite guys when he was in the amateurs, and the amateurs are so much different. But a little part of me is concerned about Andrade. Could he turn out to be another Bernard Taylor type? Is it this going to be a situation of Benavidez just chasing him around the ring all fight, him fighting to survive? He goes the distance, loses clearly. I think the sport of boxing would be better served if Benavidez actually wins this fight, because he makes for better fights, Jack. And I could see the scenario to Andrade could beat Benavidez. Let's say he shuts him down and he clearly beats him on points. He might be in a Dimitri Bivol situation. No one to really fight, no big fights out there. His career lags again, and Benavidez might be in a big fight sooner than Andrade, even if he loses to him this time around. But I've always been very high on Demetrius Andrade. I've always liked David Benavidez a lot. I really have. But I've always been extra high on Demetrius Andrade. And this is now put up a shut up. He's either going to make me look good, the faith I've had in him, or he's going to come up empty. Let me ask, the decisions lately, Frank, are interesting in boxing. The A-side fighters, aren't they actually getting a bump from the judges lately? Even the Shakur-Stevenson fight, which we'll get to later, I thought Stevenson won a little more decisively than what the judges had it. And they have some of these decisions pretty close. Now, I kind of wonder if it's a close fight. Is Benavidez truly the ace side in this fight? Or is he just slightly the ace side? Because we know he's a little ahead of Andrade promotion-wise.
Jack, I think he's slightly the A side for one reason. And that is because I believe, and I don't think you'll disagree, a lot of times these fights are always a preview to set up the next fight. And I just think that Benavidez, because of, again, his style, his swagger, the way he fights, he's a puncher. He tries to win by knockout every time out. I just think that makes for more exciting fights. And I think that people that follow boxing and that know who Canelo is, and there's a side that wants to see him get beat, and then there's a side that worships him. And I just think they'd rather see Canelo fight Benavidez than Andrade, because I think they think it's more fireworks. Where if we get Benavidez and Canelo, or Benavidez and Canelo is fireworks, where if it's Andrade, it could be a fight like Lara or Austin Trout, a fight where Canelo wins but doesn't look good. Or if he fights Benavidez, if he's going to be in a real fight. And I think that's why Benavidez is the A side. And I think if it's close, because he has the bigger name, Jack, I think it will help him a little bit.
Yeah, well, prediction time, Frank. I mean, I know you were firmly for Benavidez all along. Now it seems like, even though it appears that you're sticking with Benavidez, a little more doubt has creeped in, as you kind of
Jack, there is more doubt. I'm going to say it. There is more doubt. At one time, I thought Benavidez would pretty much handle him. I'm going to pick Benavidez. I'm going to pick him to win a decision. But I wouldn't be surprised at the end of that decision if, even though he won, people might think a little less of him. So, Joe Bergman says 9-3. I think that's a good call. I'll go 8-4, maybe 7-5. I think Benavidez just outworks him a little bit.
A legitimate decision. I'm going to go with Andrade to spring the upset. Close decision. Whether he gets the decision or not, that's another matter. I might come back to you and talk after the fight and say, well, I thought Andrade, I had him a little ahead on my scorecard, even though he didn't get the decision. I look for a pretty close fight, a very close fight, and I look for Andrade to edge out Benavidez.
Well, Jack, but here's the bigger question.
This is showtime for Andrade. His whole career is wrapped up into this fight. This is what he's been waiting for. If he comes up empty, he's basically through.
He's going to have his A game, Jack. But Jack, the bigger question is this: will Canelo fight the winner?
Canelo wouldn't be so quick to fight Andrade, because Andrade's style is wrong for Canelo, because Andrade's more hidden move fighter, very fast, very slick. Benavidez would come to Canelo. Canelo could box him. It could exchange.
Counter.
In the fight, the business-wise, a fight with Benavidez would do tremendous numbers. I think it would be a true mega fight. If Benavidez legitimately beats Andrade clearly, let's say he stops him. Let's say it's a blowout. He stops Andrade in 7 and 8.
That's huge. That's a statement.
Which he might make. Let's say Benavidez makes a statement, and I'm not saying that can't happen. I can see that happening. Benavidez making a major statement, a fight.
He wins in 6 rounds. Canelo's got a problem. He's got to face him.
How's Canelo? You're right. How's Canelo going to avoid him? The only way Canelo can avoid him, he'd have to look at other options. Does he really want to go in with Dimitri Bivol? He might say to Bivol, come down to super middleweight. I have unfinished business. The public would accept that instead of Benavidez for the time being. You could delay certain things. On the undercard, this concerns me a bit. Jamal Charlo is fighting Jose Benavidez, David's brother. If Jamal wins decisively, it bothers me, but I could just talk of Canelo fighting Jamal Charlo, who's been woefully inactive.
I can see that.
At one point, that would have been a heck of a matchup. We would have loved to see that, but not now. I mean, let Charlo string together a few wins. He might not even win Saturday, but let him string together a few wins.
But if he wins convincingly, he'll remain undefeated. He has the name. They can sell the brother aspect, and I could see Canelo fighting him before he fights Benavidez or Andrade. I really could see that because, look, this sport is a business, and Canelo knows that if he signs to fight Jamal Charlo, a lot of people like you and I will bitch and complain, but guess what? A lot of people are still going to buy it, and it's going to do big numbers. But I'm interested in that fight because Jose Benavidez is not a walkover. He gave Crawford a good go for a while. Now he's at a higher weight, so I do have some interest in to see that fight.
Okay, let's talk, Frank, about last Thursday night. Shakur Stevenson, Edwin De Los Santos. People are coming down hard on Shakur Stevenson now. He won a unanimous decision. Two cards, one 16, 112, the other one 15, 113. I had it a little wider, but I have no complaints with those cards, okay, at all. And Shakur Stevenson was supposed to make a bit of a statement himself, and I'll be honest about it. I have very little sympathy for Shakur Stevenson, even though the criticism over his performance is maybe a little bit over the top. He had an off night, but he got the W. He legitimately got the W. All great fighters have that off night now and then. They're all stale. I mean,
Absolutely.
I remember Ali would call Milkenberger. You know, you just have these nights once in a while.
Nobody's up every night.
Stevenson does so much trash talking all the time. He deserves what he gets now, I think. You know, now everyone is coming after him. Devin Haney saying, I should have only offered him 10%. The guy's a fraud. Devin Haney's saying that. And Garcia, Ryan Garcia's putting him down. Of course, those guys aren't going to sign to fight him. They have their chance to take their swipes at Shakur Stevenson because it's fair game now, because he was very boring on top of that. It wasn't like it was an entertaining fight.
I just can't believe how complacent he was offensively and didn't get off more. That's what blew me away. And Jack, I kind of agree with you. I think he had an off night, but I have to admit this, and I hate to be a prisoner of the moment, but I might have to reevaluate him a little bit because I actually thought he would be the guy. In fact, Randy and I talked about this last week. We both said if somebody offered us a chance to buy into the future of anybody 135, we both agreed it would be Shakur Stevenson. And then 2 nights later, he goes out and he lays an egg. He just did not look good. I'm going to write it off till he just had a bad night. Maybe the style was wrong for him or whatever. But his stock dropped.
I want to throw this at you, Frank. We're used to fighters always making excuses all the time. We're used to that. Shakur Stevenson was basically a one-handed fighter for the most part, just basically jabbing the whole time. Is it possible? He said after Shakur Stevenson, I don't make any excuses. Is it possible he really was injured, and despite all his trash talk, he is a bit of a sportsman? It maybe isn't in his nature to make excuses. I haven't heard him since he lost to Roberto Ramirez in the Olympics for the gold medal. That was a close fight. I haven't heard Shakur Stevenson go all over saying he was robbed. Maybe he's the type of guy who really makes no excuses. And he was legitimately hurt. If he was legitimately hurt and could only use one hand, you know, then all of a sudden we look at his performance a bit differently.
Jack, all I can say is this. I don't know for sure, but I think what you say is plausible, and he doesn't want to come out and make excuses. So that's plausible. I just know this much. I still, even though I lost faith in him a little bit, and I think I have to slightly reevaluate him, I'm still trying to think if there's anybody at 135 he could fight who I would pick against him. I don't think there is.
That photo taken in Shakur Stevenson's dressing room, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
With Crawford, Mayweather, and Ward.
Ward and Shakur. You know how many fights they've had? Not one loss.
I saw that.
I mean, that's awesome when you think of it. I mean, the greatness of the four of them together. And I know you're not the biggest Mayweather fan, but in that context, the four of them
He's a great fighter.
Oh, but no, but the four of them together, how think of that run of success that all of them have had. If you combine it all as one, like I never asked you this, Frank, for example, and this is getting a little off topic, not to stay on it long. If the two Klitschkos were one, Vladimir and Vitaly, and you put their accomplishments together and they're one fighter, you're talking about maybe a top 5 heavyweight champion of all time. Maybe the greatest of all time, conceivably, if you make them into one and take those accomplishments.
Vitaly only lost twice, and Vladimir lost how many times? He lost
3.
Purity, Sanders,
Lamont Brewster.
He lost 4 times.
4 times, and then to Fury.
Yeah. So that's 6 losses, and they have over 100 wins.
5. He lost to Anthony Joshua after Fury.
That's right. Okay, that's right. So he has 5 losses. So that's 7 wins, 7 losses versus over 100 wins, and probably 70 or 80 knockouts.
Yeah, I mean, but if you look at it, Vitaly lost to Bird, but Vladimir beat Bird. So you could say he would have beaten him afterwards. You know, Corey Sanders stopped Vladimir, but then Vitaly stopped Sanders. So we would have looked at him as the one guy as winning the rematches. The Klitschko's were always one. Next to Sonny Liston, and then let's get off the Klitschko's.
Jack, let me ask you this, though.
That when they stared an opponent, the two Klitschko's together, that is the most intense stare down behind Sonny Liston's.
I always thought Foreman's stare downs were the most intimidating.
Well, he learned from Sonny Liston. That was his mentor.
Right. Jack, you know what's funny, though? You say Anthony Joshua beat Vladimir. Let me ask you this. If they fought on their best night, who would you pick?
That was a different Anthony Joshua than the one today. That way, Anthony Joshua at one point was an exceptional fighter. At one point, that guy's long gone. So if I say Joshua would have beaten Klitschko at his best, people tell me I'm crazy because they're going to think of the Joshua who ran around the ring against Ruiz in the rematch, and it looks so. At their best, wow.
That's a tough fight.
Tough fight at their very best, but Joshua didn't have a long prime. Speaking of Joshua, how about that Bill Frank December 23rd? I'm going to tell you something which is absolutely...
I love that card, Jack.
Frank, you know what's killing me? I have a birthday party I have to go to that night.
Well, unless it's your relative or your wife, I would cancel the party.
I can't get out of this. Okay? I mean, it's killing me, Frank. The way I feel about pay-per-view, I normally hate it because they don't give you quality. They're giving us quality. They're giving us great quality. Let them.
How much do you think that's going to be?
99, 95.
Will you pay that?
For that card? Are you kidding? If they show the whole card, even the preliminary matches, okay, are incredible. Think of it, how competitive these fights are, how intriguing. Deontay Wilder against Joseph Parker. We don't know whether Wilder can still push the button because he's been so inactive. Joseph Parker can win that fight. I'm not saying he will. Anthony Joshua against Otto Wallen. Who knows what Joshua...
That's a 50-50 fight in my book.
Right, Wallen could win that fight. Jarrell Miller against Daniel Dubois.
I think Miller wins that one.
That's what makes it intriguing. Dubois is going to be favored, and you're going with the underdog. I'm not disputing. I don't know who I'm picking yet. We see one of the best fighters, Dimitri Bivol, against in a fight that he clearly should win. But
Lyndon Arthur.
Yeah, Lyndon Arthur, who's competent, who beat Anthony Yard at one point in his career. And then you get these guys on the undercard like
Apataya versus Elizuro for the cruiserweight.
What fights? I mean, imagine.
And then we have
for 6-7 hours.
Oh, Jack, that is going to be great. Think about this. That's going to be Christmas weekend. So that's Saturday night. Christmas Eve is the following night. Christmas Day is Monday. So that's Saturday. We're probably going to get bowl games, NFL games, boxing, and then games on Christmas Eve. I'm looking forward to that weekend.
But Frank, on the East Coast, they're going to begin it early, the undercard. So
Right,
we
like they
might
did
have.
with the Fury fight.
So this might be like an afternoon type
That's fine. I
thing.
like that better.
It comes on 1 o'clock, and then the main event maybe ends 7:30, 8 o'clock. It might be like a 7 hour show. With fights like that, Frank, I'll go the distance 7 hours. I'll go the
Jack,
distance 7 hours.
I'm with you. I love this card. Here's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid after this card that they might try to sell us junk down the road, knowing that they can pull that off. But this is a big splash with all these cards. You have former champions, top contenders, and really, as you said, I mean, look, Frank Sanchez is going to beat Junior Fa. The big guy, what's his name? Aris Lambeck Makhmadov. The guy, he's going to win. He's going to beat Kabali. Philip Hargreavick he's going to beat Demori, who's at the end of the road.
He's a mandatory challenger for the title.
Exactly.
But the idea, Frank, regardless, they're in separate fights. They're not the main fights, okay?
Right.
If like Frank, you go into a restaurant, you don't complain about the appetizers, how they taste. I mean, you care about your entree. The entree is really delicious here. It's tremendous.
And Jack, none of the fights are a given. Again, the top 3 fights with Joshua and Wallin, Wilder and Parker, and Du Bois and Miller are, they could go either way.
Mouth-watering, yeah. Mouth-watering. I mean,
could you see your boy Allo? I could see your boy Allo and taking Joshua to a decision. And if Joshua doesn't have early success, I could see Wallin really giving him a scare and maybe beating him. I don't think he can knock him out, but I think he could outbox him.
Well, I wonder what the plan is. You saw Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren talking to one another, smiling, very friendly. And Eddie Hearn is Joshua's guy, and Tyson Fury's Frank Warren's guy. Now, we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Fury is going to be fighting Usyk. If Fury wins that fight, and it's a 50-50 fight for the most part right now, regardless of who you pick. Even though when I say 50-50, that's in my view, but I'm sure if we look at the odds, Fury's favored, right now. But if Fury wins that fight, him and Anthony Joshua would be the biggest, most appealing fight, arguably, in boxing because of Joshua's charisma. It wouldn't be the best fight for me personally, Frank, but they want to make that fight in the worst way because of the dollars it's going to generate. But doesn't Joshua have to make a statement? If Fury can afford to win a controversial split decision over Usyk, he can afford to, because Usyk is a great fighter.
Right.
Can Joshua afford a close split decision over
Joshua again has to say he can't hold serve, Jack. He's got to separate himself. He's got to score some knockdowns or get a stoppage. If it looks like his last couple fights and he just goes through the motions, no, that does no good. And I have no interest in seeing Joshua fight Usyk again. I guess you could sell me on Fury because I think Fury could be at the end of the road and maybe be taken. But that's a tough fight to call. And what if Parker gets Wilder deep late in the fight? We don't know what Wilder has left because after what I saw of Fury, he's not the same guy that fought Wilder 2 years ago. And I have a feeling that Wilder's not the same guy, although I think he can still punch.
I don't see where Parker would go. They're not going to rematch him with Joshua because Joshua outpointed him comfortably before. And he's not going to get a fight with Tyson Fury. No, they're close.
The business wants Wilder to win, and he's going to win, and I'm going to pick him to win. It's not automatic.
But Wilder, there's going to come a point, it might be in this fight or a later fight, where he's going to throw the big punches, and he's not going to knock his opponent out. And Wilder can be outpointed. His style is terrible to winning rounds. And if he doesn't knock an opponent out, he could lose. His fights with Luis Ortiz were close. Well, the first one was very close, that he stopped him in the 10th. And in the second fight, Ortiz was winning every round until Wilder landed one big punch, and it was good night in the 6th round. So
It's funny how Wilder gets so much praise, Jack. But if you think about it, that's his signature win, Ortiz.
Anthony Joshua is in such demand. He doesn't even have to fight Fury. He could veer towards Wilder because that's a major heavyweight fight. And Wilder wants that fight in the worst way. And they're interesting possibilities. And if
it was kind of neat seeing Wilder and Joshua together because I never saw them together before. I never saw pictures of them where they were together. And when they were at that press conference last week announcing the fight, to me, it hit me a little bit. They're like, wow, I've never seen them face to face, side by side. And we know that's the fight that they're trying to make down the road, assuming that they both win.
Now, Jarrell Big Baby Miller, who served time for drug suspensions and all that, who returned to the rings, won a couple of fights, beat Lucas Brown last time out, I believe. If he beats Daniel Dubois, especially
he wants Joshua.
That makes him a legitimate top 10 contender. Legitimate.
Absolutely.
You can match him with Joshua. And when Jarrell Miller was originally scheduled to fight Joshua Madison Square Garden, yours truly picked Jarrell Miller. You could Google it, and I stated all the reasons why he would beat Joshua, and that fight never came off. And Andy Ruiz
was the replacement.
You're right, exactly. Who knows whether Miller actually would have won had it taken
But I remember, Jack, thinking the same thing, that it wasn't automatic for Joshua. No, I do remember thinking that.
Joshua, too, you don't know. Joshua and Eddie Hearn might be thinking, we don't want to fight Wilder under any circumstances. If Wilder knocks Parker out cold, I think they want to avoid Wilder because Joshua's chin might be a little suspect. Wilder's probably going to land the big blows at some point. We're not sure whether Joshua could absorb it. A fight with Tyson Fury is worth it because there's so much money in it. Even if you lose, you win. You know, with the pot of gold that you're going to get. Eddie Hearn was all bold. After Fury struggled with Nagano, he was bragging, Anthony Joshua, I guarantee it, would knock out Fury within 6 rounds. And I'm thinking, really? He couldn't hurt Jermaine Franklin last time out. So don't tell me what he's thinking to Fury.
You know what's messing with me? And sometimes when I get a voice in my head and I can't turn it off, there's something to it. I had a feeling before the fight with Ngannou that Tyson Fury was going to embarrass boxing and not look great. And I said it would go the distance. What scares me is I have a feeling that he's going to have his A game for Usyk. He's going to win and he's going to look good. And I think that hurts boxing. I think it would be best for boxing if Usyk shows up and takes him apart and Tyson Fury is gone. I think his act is worn out. He's no longer funny. Nobody buys it. He totally embarrassed himself the last time out. And I really am pulling for Usyk, but I have a feeling that Fury's going to show up and fight well. And then the whole shenanigan starts again. Give me Francis again. I'm in shape now. I'll take him apart.
Like Francis again. I could see that happening. If that happens, and I can see that scenario unfolding that you just mentioned. If Fury clearly wins the fight, what's he going to want to do next? He's going to want a money grab. He's going to dictate terms to Anthony Joshua, assuming Joshua beats Wallen. And I know you can't assume that, but let's say Joshua does it decisively. He's going to tell Joshua, I'm fighting you 80-20 split my favor, maybe 75-25.
Joshua won't take that, Jack.
Joshua won't take it. So now Joshua is stuck maybe to fight Deontay Wilder if Wilder does the job on Park. And that would be a great matchup. Boxing fans wouldn't mind that. They would like that nearly as much as Joshua fighting Fury. And Fury goes back in with Ngannou again. And my feeling is, after beating Usyk, he shows up out of shape for the rematch, struggles. And imagine he loses.
I don't think he would. I think he'd show up in shape, Jack. I think he would. I think he's getting ripped so bad now that the only way he can stop the bleeding is he'd have to go back and really take Ngannou apart. So I don't think there's a chance he shows up not in shape.
You know who might be in the driver's seat? Ngannou. He could pick.
Yep.
He easily could pick whoever he wants. Joshua could say, I'm fighting Ngannou instead of Fury, and Ngannou might be game for fighting Joshua.
He might have a hard time, though, Jack, because he's a risk with no reward.
No, but hey, if they offer him a 50-50 split with Joshua, put it in Wembley Stadium, and they beat Fury to the punch, because if Fury fought Ngannou again, he's going to want the good bulk of the money. He's going to say, at least 70-30 my favor. But Eddie Hearn and Joshua might think, we could beat this guy. In reality, he's an amateur, 50-50. We beat him decisively. We make Fury look really bad.
That would be a good move, Jack, but the risk would be there too. Because if Joshua got stopped, his career's done.
Yeah, I want to say something. There were a couple of more fights this weekend. There's another fight coming up. Oh, I'm sorry. On Saturday, okay? The rematch, Chantel Cameron and Katie Taylor. Good women's match. The first time around, Cameron beat Taylor on a close decision. Legitimately beat high, scored the fight. Legitimately, okay? She just took it to Taylor. Now they're having a rematch in Ireland, and I don't see why Cameron shouldn't win again. Hard-fought, close fight. Because viewing their first fight, I couldn't see anything Taylor would do differently. She fought her rear end off that fight.
I only saw highlights, Jack. I don't follow the women's boxing as closely as you. I like Cameron to win this time, too. I agree. Yeah, I'm not sure Katie will be as good this time.
Sure, it's a big fight.
A lot of miles.
Yeah. On the undercard, I just want to give a plug to this welterweight Patty Donovan, who's unbeaten in something like 15 fights. He signed with Matchroom Boxing. He's managed by Keith Sullivan and Andy Lee. Andy Lee, former WBO champion, who's a trainer, as well, and trains him as well. And I kind of keep out like an eye for Patty Donovan.
He's a welterweight.
Welterweight, good young fighter, and they're doing it the right way. He's getting exposure on these big undercards. So you get used to fighting in front of like big crowds and big venues. So then when your time actually does come, you're not completely overwhelmed. It's not like you're coming from a small club to, the main arena. But so that seems to be a solid card Saturday. I want to go back to a couple of fights that took place. One of my favorite fighters, Frank, is Emmanuel Navarrete. We all have favorite fighters. I love Emmanuel Navarrete. He fought a draw with, and I have a hard time pronouncing his name, Robson Fonseca. Okay, I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. You could tell me a perfect way to pronounce it, and I'll continue to pronounce it wrong. That's just me. Mental block on this. But Navarrete actually disappointed me. It was a draw. I thought he won the fight. He scored 2 knockdowns, but the CompuBox totals had Navarrete way behind, and you're not the biggest fan of CompuBox, but I saw the guide. I couldn't ignore it. But it was the last round of the fight that bothered me about Navarrete's performance. No one in boxing has more of a motor than Navarrete. Once he gets going, as the fight progresses, he's the equivalent of let's say a featherweight, a junior lightweight Smoking Joe Frazier. You pick up a full head of steam and you keep it going. And at the end of the 11th round, Fonseca walks back to his corner wobbly. And I'm thinking to myself, they should stop this fight because he's entered the danger zone. I'm concerned. Yet he comes out for the 12th round renewed, and Navarrete had no urgency. Didn't really do anything. He lost the round. He was complacent. And he had to know the fight was close. And that resulted in a draw. Had Navarrete won that fight, he would have, won the round. He would have won the fight. He retained his title. So in a sense, Navarrete, could smile afterwards. I'm still the champion. But for someone who I think should maybe be a lower half top pound for pound candidate, because I think Navarrete is that good, that exciting. It kind of disappointed me, how he ended the fight in round 12.
And Jack, I fell asleep before I came on and caught the Shakur fight, so I can't add anything to what you say.
A lot of people were just the opposite, the Shakur fight.
I know. I know.
The closest thing to Shakur Stevenson, if we're talking about great fighters who we could compare him to, we're talking style-wise, talent, the whole package, would maybe be Pernell Whitaker. He doesn't have Whitaker's accomplishments, so I'm not rating him as high.
No, he's only had 20 fights.
Yeah, exactly.
Or 21.
But has Whitaker on the way up ever had a clunker like that? I can't recall. How many great fighters?
But Whitaker, Jack, he came away not looking great, though, sometimes. He didn't come close to losing, and Shakur didn't come close to losing. He just didn't blow you away. I think Whitaker had a couple of those nights.
Even Mayweather, he had a bad night with Jose Luis Castillo. A lot of people felt he lost that first fight.
But that was 35 fights into his career.
But Castillo, too, was an established fighter, more so than De Los Santos. Okay,
and Castillo had his style to give him trouble too. That he wasn't ready for the first time.
Yeah, but I think it happens to everyone. It happens to all great fighters from time to time.
And Jack, it happens.
Jones, on the
Jack,
way
it
up.
happens more to the guys that aren't big punchers too, because when a guy has a style and he goes the distance with them, he kind of makes them not look so good. Where the punchers, the Foremans, the Tysons, guys like that, when they blow guys out, they look good. Even if they lose a couple rounds, we remember how they finished. So, but when you see 10 rounds and Shakur doesn't look good or great, I think that sticks in your mind a little bit more.
Well, Foreman at the same stage, Frank.
Hurtado's a good one.
Gregorio Peralta gave him problems. It went the distance, and
it was only his 15th fight, though.
Right.
He was only a pro for less than a year.
Well, Jason Gonzalez mentions Hurtado. I'm getting tongue-tied the first name, Hurtado.
And he was doing well with Whitaker. Then Whitaker exploded in the 11th round.
Whitaker took him out in the 11th round, but Whitaker was past his peak. We talk about when he was on the way up in his prime, not when a guy's past his peak. I don't want to look to see who gave him problems then.
Jack, have we been on since Crawford's been stripped?
Yeah, we have. I don't take it seriously. Listen, I have mixed feelings on the sanctioning bodies, okay? And one end, we do need sanctioning bodies. I got into a big argument in social media today, Frank. I won't say it was a friendly argument, but it bothered me because I was going back and forth. A guy who we both have tremendous respect for, Ben Dowdy. He posts a lot of things. Ben is a great guy, by the way, an extremely knowledgeable writer, media fan, the whole bit. But Ben felt that before Mike Tyson fought Michael Spinks, Tyson was the real heavyweight champion. And I don't want this based on belts. Spinks won the title in the ring against Larry Holmes. Then there was that HBO tournament which Spinks refused to enter.
To fight Tony Tucker.
Because he was champion at the time. Why fight Tucker for lower money? He had a right to pick and choose. He had to rematch with Spinks. Then he had a fight with Stephen Tankstead. And then Jerry Cooney. He actually made 3 defenses of the title, even though the Spinks rematch was controversial. A lot of people thought Larry won. And then Tyson blew him out. There's no arguing that emotionally at the time, people looked at Tyson more as the heavyweight champion than Spinks emotionally, but a lot of that had to do with marketing and Tyson's greatness as well. Okay? Don't get me wrong. But the real champion, the point I'm trying to make is Michael Spinks. So they came back at me, well, Spinks voluntarily gave up his IBF title. So that means he, gave up being champion. No, he gave up an IBF title. He didn't give up his claim to being world champion. The reason he gave up his IBF title, he gets stripped if he didn't fight the guy they told him to. So he said, I don't want it anymore. Basically, Crawford did it a little differently. They kind of stripped him. But what would have been the difference if Crawford said, screw it, I'm not doing what you said, I'm give up the title, and walks out the door? It's like the old line, Frank. One person says, you're fired. And the other person said, I'm not fired, I quit.
I
and
quit.
Then they walk out.
Well, Crawford had the escape, though, Jack, because he had the rematch with Spence, so that kind of gave him an out. He had to honor that. If he didn't have the rematch with Spence, and if he wasn't committed to that, they probably would have stripped him if he didn't fight Boots.
Yeah, well, they basically did that.
Right,
Okay,
but Crawford gets an out for not fighting him because he has to fight Spence, which is still up in the air.
No one would have a right to force Crawford to fight Boots Ennis. With all Crawford's done in his career, he came off a mega fight with Errol Spence. He has every right to pick and choose who he wants to fight in his next fight. Now, after that, you're going to want to see him in big fights. But I'm a believer, if you're on very big fights, you're allowed an easier fight in between to pick and choose. Okay, but with that said, you can only keep a guy waiting so long if he's the mandatory challenger. And the point is, we know Tyson was much more popular than Spinks. Emotionally, people looked at him as the heavyweight champion of the world. But I'm talking about the reality is, and
they both needed each other, Jack, to be considered the champ.
Let me throw this at you, Frank. These two cases, and you're going to laugh. In 1967, in reality, there's only one sanctioning body, the WBA. Guess who held the belt, Frank, when Ernie Terrell fought Muhammad Ali? Ernie Terrell was the champion. Can you imagine making the argument, well, Terrell's the champ, he holds the belt? It would have been ludicrous to think that at the time. No one regarded Terrell as the champion. We all knew Ali was a champion. That was a no-brainer.
But they stripped him because he gave Liston a rematch.
Yeah, but can you imagine in this day and age, people would be looking at Terrell as being the champion or as much as Ali? It's crazy. Let me throw another one at you.
But technically, you could say Ali won the title 4 times then.
Let me throw this at you historically, too. A couple more cases. Could you imagine Jim Jeffries comes out of retirement and they decide he was never beaten? He's the champion against Jack Johnson. They get that.
No, not after 6 years.
And I'll throw this at you too. Louis Schmeling, the rematch might never have taken place because one of the sanctioning bodies would have stripped Jimmy Braddock for signing to fight Louis. Schmeling would have had a fight in Germany, won that fight. And he would have been a champion of one of the sanctioning bodies. I refuse to give in to this stuff, Frank. I know
the only thing I'll say, Jack, the only thing I'll say regarding the Tyson Spinks thing is, I think it all depends on which way you want to come down. I don't think there's really, I can see both points. All I can say is this. Tyson had to beat Spinks to get full recognition.
Yeah.
And Spinks needed to beat Tyson to get full recognition. The difference was Spinks needed the recognition more than Tyson did, but Spinks wanted the money at that time. And Butch Lewis made a great play because I actually think that if Spinks had fought Tony Tucker in that tournament, I think he would have lost the decision.
I want to tweak what you said. Tyson needed to fight Spinks to get recognition. Tyson got $21 million guaranteed. Spinks got $13.5 million because Tyson was by far the biggest draw. It didn't matter who was champion when it comes to business like that. But Tyson needed Spinks to get really historical recognition. I think Spinks needed Tyson not to be recognized as heavyweight champion. He had a strong enough claim, and in reality was he needed him for the money. He badly needed him for the money. What was he going to do? Take another fight for $2 million somewhere?
Exactly. It was a business decision.
You know what?
And it was smart.
A quick question. Jason Gonzalez, why hasn't Canelo been stripped yet?
Because he's the cash cow.
Cash cow. But with that said, you kind of wonder, the IBF is stripping Crawford, okay? Wouldn't it be better for them to get Crawford's 3% because his fights would be bigger, unless they feel Boots Ennis is going to become a major attraction, you know? Or maybe,
Jack,
let me go another way. Sometimes the sanctioning bodies do this stuff because they really are trying to do the right thing, Frank, and they really are trying to protect fighters' interests. So let me throw a compliment as well.
Okay, that could be. But Jack, you know what the funny thing is? Everybody, and I see it on social media, everybody now that was a Spence fan, they've gone to Boots. They love Boots now. Now Crawford's afraid of him. You know as well as anyone, they are my two favorite fighters in the sport of boxing right now, Bud and Boots. That said, if Bud were to fight Boots, say, in March or April, okay, their next fight, and Bud beats him pretty convincingly, he gets no credit for that. People say Boots didn't beat anybody. He looked good against guys that were second tier, but he wasn't in Crawford's league. Crawford gets nothing for that.
Like Mayweather and Canelo, everyone now thinks, well, he beat Canelo when he was a younger pup, even though Canelo was established.
Canelo was undefeated and was the bigger guy. Even Mayweather brought him down. It's still a good win. I don't think it's as great as it's made up to be. But the point is, I can see why Bud has reservation fighting Boots, because it's a risk and he gains nothing. After working his whole career, he gains nothing. So I don't blame Bud for his take on it, and I can't blame Boots for yelling for the fight and saying all that he said. I just know this much, though. If I'm Boots and I'm managing Boots, I still think I want to wait a little longer before I start tugging at that bear and make that my next fight, because I think Crawford still has something in the tank. Boots, as much as I love him, and I actually think he might be the better skilled guy who has quicker hands. You know what, Jack? He could end up getting defeated pretty overwhelmingly.
Yeah, these losses could haunt the guy later on. Boots could fight Crawford next. Let's say Crawford says, okay, let's get it on. Crawford could knock him out conceivably in spectacular fashion, lay him out in 7 to 8 rounds.
Late in the fight, right?
Boots can go on to establish himself conceivably as an all-time great. And that loss is going to be there all the time. It's going to stick out all the time. And what's he going to say? Well, I was young. Why doesn't he fight me now? So Crawford has a good point, and Crawford's under no obligation to fight Boots right now. But the problem Boots Ennis is facing is this, Frank. If he can't get a Crawford fight, what top-of-the-line fight is ever going to fight him? The only way
they're going to want so much money.
Yeah, but the only way he could elevate himself, Boots will have to fight a few times a year, force the issue, be busier than other fighters, and get his attention.
That's not a bad thing, though.
No, it's not, but they don't think that way. I mean, I had an idea once for Crawford before he got the Spence fight. Go to Bob Arum when he was promoting you, and Bob Arum had the contract with ESPN. I realize you can't pay me big money for these fights. We're going to do something that hasn't been done in modern times by anyone. I'm fighting once a month. Fight of the month. Terrence Crawford, fight of the month. The ratings would be great. People would eat it up. Wow, Terrence is a real fighter. It would elevate him above everyone else.
Look what it did to George Foreman on his comeback.
Yeah, I mean, Foreman kept busy. I thought it was a big joke, in the beginning when that happened. And
the first 20 fights were a joke. Then it got serious.
Bomac, Crawford's trainer in closing. I read where he says Errol Spence would destroy Tim Tszyu. No contest.
He has to say that, Jack. He has to say that. If it would have been before the Crawford fight, I could see the case for Spence. But I don't think Spence will be the same after that fight. And I think I would pick Tszyu to beat Spence if they fought.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with Tszyu. I'd still like to see Jermell Charlo fight Tszyu. I think that's the only fight out there for Charlo where he can redeem himself after the Canelo loss. Decisive win over Tim Tszyu gets his career back on track. But we'll see if that fight.
All right, Jack. Let me just make sure you have the Chiefs tonight and Michigan Saturday, right?
Michigan Saturday, and I have Andrade winning a close decision, upsetting David Benavidez at 4-1 odds. But
Jack, we disagree on 3. I have Benavidez, the Eagles, and Ohio State.
Wow,
This will be fun.
Okay, Frank.
Good talking. Good seeing you, Jack. We'll see you next week, everybody.
See you.
Thanks for watching.